So it seems like we have yet another live service game going to be shutting down. And this time, Xdefiant is going to be shutting down at some point in the future. Now, I do want to clarify on this part before everyone jumps the gun here. Xdefiant is still available to play right now. The game is still available and up and running, but unfortunately, due to some of the reports that have been going on, apparently next year, I believe at the start of the summer, I think in June, that's when the game is going to be shutting down, unfortunately. Now, I'm pretty sure a good handful of you folks know about this, but for those of you who were not aware, let me get you up to speed real quick. Earlier this year, a game called Concord has basically shut down, and that was supposed to be Sony's biggest banger, and the game didn't even live long enough to see the light of day, and I made a video talking about how Concord was the biggest failure in gaming history, and that game was a live service disaster. No shocker there, because the game was just poorly mishandled. And now Xdefiant seems to be going on a similar boat because the game is just not getting the proper care that it needs. Now, before we do continue this little discussion video slash news update, there is an article that I do want to read to you folks that does help talk about this issue even more. So, this article comes from gamesradar.com. I'm going to read it to you folks, and then we will discuss as we go along. Ubisoft has announced the sunsetting of its free-to-play first-person shooter Xdefiant. Likewise, Ubisoft San Francisco and Ubisoft Osaka are shutting down while Ubisoft's Sydney's office is ramping down. Xdefiant released back in May and reached 1 million unique players within just 2.5 hours, a record for Ubisoft despite the game's middling reviews. So, I want to talk about this part for a second before we continue this discussion any further. So, the game released back in May, and when the game first launched, it was pretty successful at first because a lot of people were happy about it and a lot of people were enjoying it at that time. And I made a video talking about how basically the Call of Duty fanboys were mad at Xdefiant's success and they were just intentionally review bombing the game, trying to, I guess, I don't want to say sabotage, but try to hurt the game's reputation, if that makes sense. Because we all know Xdefiant has been given this, I guess, saying from its fan base or people who played the game, and it's been a word of mouth thing, and a lot of people were calling Xdefiant the COD killer or the Call of Duty killer, and it was going to be like the greatest first person shooter to ever come out. But as time went on, the game hasn't really lived up to that standard. It hasn't become the quote unquote COD killer it was meant to be. And as time goes on, like some of the features in the game that Call of Duty had weren't really in Xdefiant. There wasn't really a dedicated prestige mode. The grinding in the game was a bit tedious. I mean, the content in Xdefiant wasn't really there to begin with, if we're to be completely honest. And the game was just lacking so many other quality of life features and game and play improvements that Call of Duty basically has that Xdefiant didn't. But of course, I digress. Let's continue back with the article. Starting today, players won't be able to download or register to play Xdefiant, and existing players won't be able to buy anything. Season 3 is still set to launch at an unknown date, and the servers will stay online until June 3rd, 2025. Refunds are being offered to anyone who bought the Ultimate Founders Pack, and to all players who bought anything in the game within the last 30 days. Okay, so let's talk about this. So, it sounds like, based on what the article is saying, if I'm understanding this correctly, it sounds like they're going to be refunding people who have bought the special edition of Xdefiant, like the Ultimate Edition or the Gold Edition or whatever edition you got. It sounds like you're going to be refunded that money because they're going to be shutting the game down, if I'm understanding this correctly. And to make matters worse, it doesn't sound like you will be able to even play the game if you haven't already. So let's just say if you want to try out Xdefiant right now, this very second, it doesn't sound like you'll be able to even download the game anyway, unless you have it like installed already and you deleted it and you wanted to like reinstall it. Then as long as you downloaded the game before, you should be able to reinstall it. But if you're a brand new player that wants to try and download Xdefiant, you will not be able to, based on what the article has also said. And to make matters even worse, they basically announced the game is going to be shut down, and it hasn't even been like a full year yet. I mean, the game has been announced to shut down in the summer of next year. I mean, the game came out this year in May, and like a few months into this game's life cycle, they've already announced that they're going to be shutting the damn thing down so soon. I mean, Jesus Christ. I mean, you think about games like Conquer, that was a live service disaster, which, like I've mentioned before, it has been the biggest live service disaster and one of the biggest failures in gaming history. And then you think about games like Marvel's Avengers, another live service fail that shut down. And then games like Anthem, also shut down. I mean, Jesus Christ. I mean, it's been made very clear time and time again that live service games are not working out. And the fact that these developers are trying to push towards a live service genre, especially in today's dark age of modern gaming, not a lot of people are really happy right now, especially the Xdefiant community. I mean, I said this before and I'll say it again. Live service games are not that well received. And still to this day, not a lot of people are happy with live service games, especially with the direction that the game industry's going in. And you also got to think to yourself, like, Xdefiant tried to launch in an oversaturated market. I think that's the right term to use in the gaming industry when it comes to other products. Xdefiant tried to launch in an oversaturated market where there are other shooter games that are doing it far better than Xdefiant. Games like Call of Duty, games like Fortnite even are far better in terms of the shooter department because everybody loves those games. They're getting what they want and they have far more content in the game that people want. And Xdefiant was just basically trying to play keep up and they couldn't really handle the, I guess, pressure that was thrown at them when it came to trying to appease people and trying to make them happy. Unfortunately, at this point for Xdefiant, it's on life support at this point, and it's only a matter of time when Ubisoft decides to pull the plug next year when the game officially decides to shut down. I mean, in the article, I read to you folks about how the game is going to be shutting down in June, and that's when Ubisoft will be planning to kill the plug. So it sounds like they're going to be getting one more season, and that's going to be it for Xdefiant, unfortunately. And if I'm going to be honest with you folks, I personally didn't really play Xdefiant that much. I mean, when it first came out, I gave it a try. It was pretty fun for a while, and then I kind of realized that, oh, hey, it's just another first person shooter game that's just similar to Call of Duty, and it's trying to be a Call of Duty wannabe game. And I remember talking about how this game came out in the beta and how it was, I guess, more enjoyable than it was when it fully released. Probably because the game was more fun in the beta than it was in the full release. Ubisoft is just continuing to take all of these L's, man, especially when it comes to Xdefiant, and they're planning to shut the thing down, and it hasn't even been a full year yet, even though they announced that they're going to shut it down soon. This just continues to prove to everyone that Ubisoft is incompetent and they can't make a fun game and they cannot make a good product. So I wonder now how Ubisoft is going to plan their next games going forward with all of these things happening. Now, I can already predict and I can already tell there will probably be some Call of Duty fanboys in the comment sections that will be pointing and laughing at Xdefiant, and they're going to probably be like, you guys didn't even last 6 months. Imagine releasing a live service game that's a competitor to Call of Duty and it died basically within the first year. That's embarrassing. I know this might sound really mean of me to say, but I'm actually gonna have to agree with the Call of Duty kiddos on this one. I mean, the game didn't even last a whole year, and as much as I hate Call of Duty, and as much as I hate Activision, say what you will about Call of Duty, but at least at this point, Call of Duty has more content for people to enjoy than X Defiant did. I mean, you got the zombies, you got the campaign, and you got the multiplayer that is basically living up to everyone's expectations, and X Defiant just didn't really have that much to work with. They didn't really have any like side modes. They didn't really have like a dedicated zombies mode or like a survival mode. They didn't really have that many party games. I mean, Call of Duty was just basically slapping X Defiant left and right. This feels like an equivalent of if Activision and Ubisoft were having a little baseball competition and Activision was just hitting home runs just left and right, and they were just scoring so many points. And all of a sudden, Ubisoft tried to be that powerhouse Activision was, but instead of trying to hit home runs, they've been absolutely just getting out every single time. Like, they couldn't even make the first base hit, as a matter of fact. They were just getting so bad. Like, they were just constantly scoring outs every single time, and they just basically had no breathing room. That's basically what's happening with X Defiant. X Defiant is striking out so badly. It's just an unfortunate situation, man. But it is what it is, and it sucks that it's happening. But of course, once again, this is what happens when you try to make a live service game that tries to be the greatest thing since sliced bread was invented, and only for it to just fall flat on its face. Another day, another live service game going away into the void. I don't know what it is, man, but it seems like there's some kind of trend going on here where these live service games are just coming out, they're not meeting their expectations, and they're just going away and shutting down and getting lost into the void, and there's no way to preserve these video games. Another day, another live service game gets shut down. So, with this being said, thank you everyone for watching and for listening. And until next time, I'm talking about X Defiant and how it's going to be shutting down at some point in the future. And I'll see you all later.